Bathroom stalker, let's not meet again. I learned to figure skate when I was about 3 or 4 years old, and it was one of my favorite things to do as a kid. I kept pursuing my passion as I got older. In high school, I began skating, entering in competitions. My normal practice time was on Saturday late afternoon, early evening, but since we were preparing for a competition, my coach asked me if I would come in on a Wednesday after school, and I said I could. I went in early to get some extra practice during open skate time. It was around just after sunset, and my aunt dropped me off at the rink when my ex-boyfriend was already there waiting for me. I was walking up. Ohio skate rinks is set back in between two buildings and a stairwell that goes down to a door into the building. I felt like I was being watched, but figured I was just being paranoid and kept walking. I went in and sat down and figured I'd run to the bathroom before I went out to skate. I was deciding if I wanted to put on my skates before I made the trip down to the bathroom or afterwards. I decided afterwards. The best way to describe the bathroom was more like a basement locker room. You had to go down a large staircase, and the woman's was straight ahead, and if you went to the left and around the staircase is the men's, and further down was the door to that staircase. There were a lot of people there that day, and the feeling of being watched went away until I walked down the staircase into the bathroom. It was one of those bathrooms that is not a straight shot. It is one that you walk in and have to turn at. I walked into the bathroom and I felt the feeling of being watched again, and went into the second stall, which was the middle, and there was one to either side, and the bathroom was vacant. I walk in and start to undress. I was wearing a skate dress that is almost like a leotard that was long-sleeved, also wearing tights, so it was a task to get off. I have the dress and tights down and set both my money and phone on the floor and sit down to do my business. I hear someone walk in and knock on the door, and I respond, "Someone's in here!" It was odd, because both stalls were empty. And why would someone knock on the door that I was in? The person walks over and flicks the light switch off and runs into the stall to my left. In my head, my first thought is, someone's fucking with me. The person gets onto their hands and knees and starts reaching under the stall. It is very dark in this bathroom, with only a little light from the doorway. Just enough light to see, but still very, very dark. I see a very large hand slide under the door and start feeling around. I freeze. At this point, I was still wondering if it was my ex fucking with me at this point. Trying to get a little payback, because we had some shit in the past. The hand feels my phone, and cash on the floor. I am frozen and don't know what to do. I've never been so paralyzed with fear before in my whole entire life. The hand touches my foot and I still can't move until it grabs my ankle, and grabs hard and tries to jerk it under my stall. My fear breaks and I just get pissed. I scream, "Bitch, get off me!" and try kicking the hand away. I always remembered as a kid that you never yell for help, that you yell fire, that someone's more likely to help. So I scream at the top of my lungs, "Fire!" I know there are people around the steps, and I'm a very loud girl, so I feel like someone had to hear me screaming fire. When I realize nobody is coming, I kick the guy's hand and pin it to the middle partition, and I hear a crack. This is the part that gets fuzzy. I see the guy pull his hand back. I don't remember grabbing my cell, cash, or anything. I don't even remember pulling my tights or dressed. I just ran as fast as I could up those goddamn stairs. At this point, I'm crying and running up the stairs, still half undressed, not caring if someone sees me at all. I run to the counter and tell the guy to call the cops. I've been attacked in the bathroom, and at this point, just now sliding my arm back in my dress. Of course, it's the asshole I can't stand working. He's super lazy and acts like he's forced to do his job, and he just gives me this look like he doesn't even fucking believe me. At this point, I am friggin' hysterical, and I ask the guy what he's waiting for, and to run to the bathroom to see if the guy's still there. I have a seat by my bag and wait for the police. It's only a few minutes before campus police show up. They take my statements and check the bathroom. The officer proceeds to tell me that this isn't their first call like this. That's happened a few times on campus even. The guy working the counter is standing there, and they tell him that the door that leads to the outside stairwell was left unlocked, and the man followed me and walked down that stairwell and waited for someone to walk down. He then followed me into the bathroom. I'm now terrified of public bathrooms and couldn't sleep in the dark for a long time. I refused to go to that bathroom by myself ever again, even after they changed the light switch to one where you need a key to turn it on or off. Every once in a while I think of it and wonder what would have happened if that man had gotten me under that stall, or if he was still in the bathroom when I ran out, and why nobody came when they heard me screaming. So, ladies, next time you go into a secluded bathroom, always make sure someone can hear you, or take someone with you. Creepy bathroom stalker, let's not meet again. And you have hair on your balls? When I was about 7 years old and my brother was about 14, we were at a public pool. While we were changing in the locker room getting ready to leave, a gentleman approached us and began talking to my brother. At the time, I didn't really think anything of it and wasn't paying a whole lot of attention. However, after asking a few generic questions about what we were up to and who we were with, he asked my brother how old he was. My brother replied, 14, and the man began to smile big and said excitedly, "And you have hair on your balls?" My brother and I quickly left the establishment and told my mom, who was waiting in the car outside. My memory gets foggy here, but I know she went back into the front desk or something like that. But I don't think they ever found him or anything, and that's where it ended. I was their favorite. I've always remembered this incident, but it wasn't until this morning that I realized just how unsettling that day truly was. This happened when I was in 7th grade, so I was around 13 years old at the time. There was a public pool not far from my hometown, but it was in a less familiar, slightly sketchier area that my family never had a need to visit. 2 of my close friends back then wanted to go through, so we went. For some context about the area, I'm from the Midwest, so there is a lot of wooded or open land. I'm used to attending a pool that's very secure and in a fairly busy, occupied part of the town. This pool, however, was set right beside a highway that is mostly bordered by trees, trailer parks, and open land. It was the only stop on this particular portion, with no buildings or anything besides a gas station and the surrounding trees. The pool was basically just a very large square of water, a gravel parking lot, and some land for picnic benches. It just always felt out of place. Anyways, my friends and I spent some time tanning, talking, then eventually get bored and walk over to the open grass, which is the opposite side with the parking lot. There was a volleyball net, and we didn't have a ball. Sitting on the closest picnic table was what seemed to be a family gathering. I recall 3 or 4 men, a couple women, and I do believe there were some kids as well. And they had a volleyball. Believing them to be a family-friendly outing, we asked if we could borrow the ball. 2 of the men looked at each other and said, "Sure thing." We thanked them and grabbed the ball when they said, "In fact, we'll play with you." My friends and I were uncomfortable with this idea. We just wanted to play a game with each other, and these men were at least in their 40s, wearing old jeans and t-shirts and total strangers. Not to mention, we were in swimming suits. Young and not confident enough to say no, we went with it. We started the game and, though still weird, it seemed normal for a while. Until the comments, "Wow, you guys are so good, we don't stand a chance." And then, "Which one is your favorite?" one said to his friend. What was said next, I'll never forget. "Zuhari is my favorite." He looked me right in the eyes, smirking and unmoving, not even playing anymore. Now, I don't know if this is worth mentioning, but as a kid, I struggled because I developed much earlier than other kids my age, and the development was noticeable. I don't know if that's why he said that, but possibly. My friends and I felt each other's discomforts, so we dropped the ball, said thanks, and walked to the furthest picnic bench away. What baffles me is that the woman saw nothing wrong with this, even with children of their own. Maybe the game was innocent, people trying to entertain a few kids, but after those words, I don't think so. And after what happened next, I know so. We hung out at our picnic table for a while, taking pictures, talking. We had all but forgotten the awkward volleyball game. A gravel road runs parallel to the tables and connects to the back of the parking lot, so that it loops around the end of the pool. People can drive their cars from the lot to the benches that way. The men's table was at the end of this road, where the tables are closest to the front of the pool, us being closer to the loop. We hear the sound of a car on gravel coming towards us, coming from their direction. I remember watching the truck, knowing it was them, and repeating in my mind, don't stop by us, and they didn't. They passed us. Then they kicked it in reverse. They must have not seen us at first. Luckily, the road was a distance from the tables. They began hollering at us, and at this point, I was so nervous, I couldn't even make out what they were saying. But they were gesturing for us to come closer, wanting us to get in. We just stared, frozen. They were getting more frantic. Then one began to open the door. "Let's go now," I whispered through gritted teeth. Without a word, we hightailed out of there into the locker room. We left shortly after. I always thought of this as a funny, spooky story. Now I realize just how wrong this really was, and what those men would have wanted with three 13-year-old girls at a swimming pool. So, strange men from the pool that is thankfully shut down now. Let's not meet. You are not my favorite. The time I almost let my politeness win over my common sense. To preface, I'll never know what this man's intentions were, but I'm thankful I listened to my gut anyways, even if it took me a hot minute to smarten up. At the time that this happened, I did not think much of it until looking back on it from the perspective of an adult more mature and wiser. Now, as I revisit the memory of this encounter, I'm convinced something more sinister was at play, but I'll never know for sure. I was 17 years old and, as teenagers tend to be, a lot less cautious than a young girl of my age ought to be in a new country completely foreign to herself. I was on vacation with my family to escape the cold winter up north. My parents were very liberal about giving me the breathing room I desired, and I wasted no opportunity to use that to my advantage as much as I could afford. It was a family resort, and nobody was all that concerned about anything happening. We all had our vacation blinders on, so to speak. Every night, after the sun went down, I liked to wander off to the pool and swim and soak in the hot tub while my parents stayed in their rooms. When you're basking in the lap of luxury at a high-end resort, you don't think about the potential for danger. In hindsight, I suppose is why tourists are considered ideal targets for predatory activity. Being on vacation made me more sociable, and additionally, more trusting than I normally would be. I admit that the false security that came from being within the illusionary security of this protected resort caused me to lower my guard substantially. The fact that I've been going to and from the pool area by myself every single night with no incident thus far only heightened my nonchalant behavior. While my parents gave me the breathing room to enjoy my independence, I was here to make friends and have a good time. I didn't care about anything else. So, just like any other night during my stay, I was lounging in the hot tub, chattering amongst the guests. All my worries completely forgotten for the moment. I was getting a lot of attention mainly because it was apparent I was Canadian, and all the guests amongst me were apparently fascinated by that. I was barraged with questions, some of which I could not decipher whether they were genuine or trolling. Yes, we do have heat and electricity up north, I kid you not, I was actually asked that. Amongst this group of people, I was particularly invested in this conversation I was having with a much older man who came off as nothing but warm and friendly. He had claimed he too was on vacation with his family, but that they were nowhere to be seen. In fact, he, not including myself of course, was the only one who seemed to not know anyone there. Everyone else was with their families. I figured that was normal enough, however, because I too was vacationing with my family, and they were nowhere in sight either. What strikes me as more odd, however, is how he seemed to be engaging only me in conversation and ignoring everyone else. He was also nearly 3 times my age. Doesn't help matters. As the night progressed, people began retreating to their rooms, leaving just me, this man, and a few others. It was around this time that he shared with me what room he was staying at before asking innocently where I was staying. I foolishly told him, but only the sectional area. Although he had asked which room specifically, I had enough sense to not divulge that much information. Things didn't take a particularly unsettling turn until I began to notice how eerily quiet things had become. There were still some people around, of course, but it was just me and him in the hot tub now. I took this as my cue to start heading back. Bidding him goodbye, I got up to leave, and he instantly stopped me. He insisted that he walk me back to my room, as it's not safe for a pretty little thing like me to be wandering around the resort by myself at this late hour of the night. I took this for concern akin to a protective uncle, but waved off the supposed hospitality, insisting I would be alright. He became more persistent, switching from concerned guardian to fearmonger. He told me how bad things happen to young girls like me without an escort, as he droned on about the dangers that might surely befall me as a young female on vacation with no parents around to guard me, a small and defenseless young girl. I felt the first wave of unease wash over me. I shook it off and smiled warmly, telling him thank you, but that I would manage fine on my own. He seemed to deflate as his expression became more exasperated. At least let me walk you part of the way there until I know you're safe. This puzzled me. If there were predators lurking, how would I be any safer walking from the halfway point from where I was now? Besides, it being a shorter trek, Nevertheless, his concern was beginning to wear me down. He had gotten me thinking about how dark it was now and the vulnerable position I was in. He was right. I practically had a target on my back. Okay, I nodded after a moment of hesitation. I was young and naive and thought it would be an advantage to have someone bigger and stronger walking with me. I know. I was incredibly foolish, and I was a sheltered teenager with far too much faith in humanity as a whole. Very unlike the cynical and distrustful woman I am now, who always follows her gut. I also, as annoyingly typical as this sounds, did not want to be rude. Fortunately, I have since grown out of my people-pleasing complex and will not hesitate to say no when I feel uncomfortable at the first sign of any red flag. But I had yet to develop this quality then. I hesitantly relented. At the moment, my fear of coming off as rude to an adult overrode that of any subconscious or otherwise concern I had for my safety. His eyes lit up, and he nodded approvingly. Good. Let's get going then. It's late and your parents will worry. I ignored the twisting in my gut and rose from the hot tub, shivering from the sudden exposure of the cold air, suddenly feeling too exposed. I hastily fastened my towel around myself and padded towards the lockers. At this point, I was just determined to get back to the safety and warmth of my hotel room. It was only as I was getting closer to leaving that I began to get this sinking feeling in my stomach that something about this whole night just wasn't right. My suspicions were further affirmed as I took note of my escort following me. The lockers were outside, and the woman's changing room to the left of them. I was going to retrieve my clothes from the locker, change in the locker room, and then go with a stranger, complete stranger who I did not know at all. I noticed he was standing a little too closely now, and I instinctively shrunk away from him. This definitely wasn't right. But it wasn't until I was shakily pulling my top over my soaked bikini top, which regrettably assented my womanly curves a little more than I was comfortable with at that moment, and of which he seemed to notice as well, that I decided I could not wander off with a strange man I hardly knew. Any last bit of false security had waned away the moment I felt his eyes on me, watching me dress, his eyes clearly appraising my body. I shivered again, this time not from the cold, as I put on the rest of my clothes. I had already made my decision. I really appreciate you offering to walk me back, but I think I'll manage after all. Thank you, though. He grew solemnly quiet, which stirred a growing sense of unease within me, as I began to feel more and more validated in my decision not to go off with this man. Are you sure? He pressed. I would hate for anything to happen to you. I nodded more insistently and forced a smile. No, it's alright, I'll be fine, thank you. Okay, he said quietly, as I practically started running for the exit. While still in earshot, behind me I heard him say, You be careful now. You never know who might be out there. As soon as I was out of his sight, I began bolting, and was stopped in my tracks instantly by the second weight of impending dread to hit me that night. I decided against walking back on foot and headed towards the on-resort shuttle instead. On the way there, on 2 separate occasions within the space of no more than 10 minutes, 2 older men in their 50s made a pass at me, and at the shuttle stop, a group of men in a car offered me to give me a ride, but I ended up making it safely back from the shuttle without any further incident. Later, I wrote off as paranoia and convinced myself that he was really just a hospitable old man with a young girl's best interests at heart. But now that I know from personal experience how the men that seem the nicest with seemingly good intentions often are the worst predators, I am convinced I made the right decisions that night.